Today we are going to talk about various questions that we keep pondering on, which is related to the Sustainable Development Goals. Where is the life we have lost in living? Where is the wisdom we have lost in knowledge? Where is the knowledge we have lost in information? What life have you if you have not life together? There is no life that is not in community. When the stranger says, "What is the meaning of this city?" Do you huddle close together because you love each other? What will you answer? We all dwell together to make money from each other, or this is a community. As said by T.S. Eliot, "O my soul, be prepared for the coming of the stranger, be prepared for him who knows how to ask questions." The change starts with us. It starts in conversation with our neighbors, colleagues, friends, and our communities by asking deeper questions and by being willing to live them. Very few moral philosophers have written on climate change. This is puzzling for several reasons. First, many politicians and policymakers claim that climate change is not only the most serious environmental problems currently facing the world, but also one of the most important international problems per se. Second, many of those working in other disciplines describing climate change as fundamentally an ethical issue. Third, the problem is theoretically challenging, both in itself and in virtue of the wider issues it raises. Indeed, some have even gone so far as to suggest that successfully addressing climate change will require a fundamental paradigm shift in ethics. Arguably, then there is a strong presumption that moral philosophers should be taking climate change seriously. So, why the neglect? In my view, the most plausible explanation is that study of climate change, which is necessarily interdisciplinary, crossing boundaries between science, economics, law, and international relations. This fact not only creates an obstacle to philosophical work, but also makes it tempting to assume that climate change is essentially an issue for others to resolve. Both factors contribute to the current malaise, and not just within philosophy, but in the wider community too. My aim here in this podcast is twofold. First, I try to overcome the interdisciplinary obstacle to some extent by making the climate change issue more accessible to both kinds of people. Second, by drawing attention to the ethical dimensions of the climate change problem. What is the role of smart design? How is infrastructure designed and maintained? And what are the implications for rural and urban settings? How is technology changing our lives, and what can we do to have the best outcomes? How do we consider issues concerning economic growth and need to provide fair and just access to opportunity? How can technology be used for positive economic and social outcomes? How do we afford and promote a good quality of life? How do we address issues of income inequality and inequity? How can we solve the persistent and chronic issues of homelessness? And how do we produce and maintain health across the lifespan? How can communities support that health production? How is climate change affecting us, and what can we do about it? What kind of disasters should we prepare, and how, for example, the present pandemic and the wildfires? How does growth and innovation factor in issues such as climate equity and resilience? What is the role of the private sector in this discussion? What kind of world do we want to leave for our children and children's children? Why are we still at war with each other and with nature, as the present war which is going on between Russia and Ukraine says? Why do we allow an economic system that no longer serves the long-term survival of our species or the well-being of our communities to dictate the way we do business and relate to each other? Why do we let our political leaders convince us that spending large proportions of our national budgets on arms and preparation for war is a necessity, when we know that these funds could provide access to water, education, food, and a dignified life for all humanity, thereby disarming the main drivers of war and conflict? How can we meet everyone's basic needs while simultaneously ensuring a common future by protecting biodiversity, stabilizing global climate patterns, and creating thriving human cultures that regenerate planetary bioproductivity? Questions like these invite us to think systematically over longer time scales and to pay attention to relationships and context rather than rushing for quick answers and silver bullet solutions. Questions like these are already driving the reinvention of economics, the co creation of diverse expressions of the new narrative of interbeing, and the transition towards regenerative cultures. By questioning dangerous ideologies that no longer serve us, we take the first step towards collectively defining the kind of questions that might help us live into more viable alternatives and help us to create regenerative cultures everywhere. Would we not do better to care for all life and the planetary life support system in ways that ensure our relatively young species gets its opportunity to live to maturity and wisdom? Consider all the creativity and beauty we have already been able to express through our diverse cultures and their arts, sciences, literature, music, stories, and cultural traditions. Humanity has already created a multitude of reflections of the ultimate and the intimate. Are you not also curious what our species might be capable of if we widen our circles of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature? By caring for the earth and all of life, we care for ourselves. By embracing our own nature as an expression of nature at large, humanity can become a conscious force of healing. The why will guide the what and the how. That's it for today.